Winter meetings down in Orlando are kicking off, and yesterday we had the luxury to listen to Brian Cashman do two interviews, and today we got to see the man himself, Aaron Boone, address the media. Now, Booney was sitting in front of what looked to be about 500 reporters, and when 500 people are asking you questions, what could go wrong? They asked everything. He gave many answers, and I'm going to break down what I think some of those answers might actually mean when we read between the lines.
Downtown goes Frazier.
Okay, just to kick things off, we're going to talk about what Aaron Boone had to say at today's winter meetings. Now, he sat in front of a lot of reporters, and there is always good things that come from Aaron Boone interviews because Boone really gives you surface level stuff. And I think that the one knock that people have about him is that they know that he's really good at navigating away from the answers that you actually think are real, and he doesn't give you the things that you know are the obvious stuff. It's pretty surface level things. He tries to make everything seem like it's pretty positive, like they have everything under control. Now, usually when you're watching a Yankees game and Booney's making decisions, and then you get to ask him a question after the game, he makes it seem like you were watching a completely different game than what he was a part of. So when we're talking about Jasson Dominguez, he was asked a question about what would the state of Jasson Dominguez's future look like in the outfield if they're fully healthy out there. So I don't really understand that question. It was asked by Randy Miller, so I'm really not shocked that I don't understand it, but I don't really understand the answer that Boone gave because he alluded to saying that what we know we've gotten Jasson is that he's a young player that got a lot of major league experience, and that he kind of framed it at the end that if a situation arises, then they'll handle it whenever it comes about. So I'm trying to read between the lines of what that means because I'm really confused. They don't have an outfield right now that would put Jasson Dominguez out of a position. So in my mind, I feel like, again, I said it yesterday. Somebody's got to step up and tell this guy that he's the starting left fielder next year. I mean, I know they're not going to, but somebody's got to alleviate a little bit of pressure and a little bit of stress on this young kid so he can feel like he actually has an opportunity. Now, obviously, a trade could happen where you move him or you sign a player or you acquire a player or he gets beat out by the job by Spencer Jones. I don't think that's going to happen, the last part, but the other two are options that we know could happen. So I think that if I were running this team and if the Yankees have not learned from anything from the past on how to help young players just have smooth waters and smooth transitions into these moments that they're going to put them into, you should really back these players and tell them that they've got the job because right now there's nobody blocking him. And so I'm like gearing up. I feel like when I'm watching this Jasson Dominguez situation that I'm about to watch this kid get screwed over. And I know that's a little harsh. I know that's a little negative, but it feels like they're going to do something to block this kid. They won't publicly commit to him, but they will consistently publicly commit to Anthony Volpe. And if you look on paper, I mean, one of them is better than the other one, and the one that looks to be better on paper than the other one is not getting any public backing that he's going to be the left fielder. So it leaves you to wonder what really is going to happen in that left field spot if they're not going to come out and just say that this guy's got the job. I mean, he's the only guy left on the roster that played left field last year for them that could play it again in the next season. So I'm kind of frustrated just watching the Jasson Dominguez situation come about. I do feel personally like it's a lot of what was going on with me. And we're not making this about me, but I do feel like a little bit of sympathy towards Jasson more than anyone else because it does feel a lot like the situation with myself. So when you see it happening, it feels like I've been there before. I kind of can read those surface level comments that they're making, and you can just see that, hey, like he didn't exactly blow them out the water with his time out there. He struggled in left field. He played sporadically at the end. He had a lot of time at the beginning, but Booney started to make comments about how, we were running a little bit of a rotation out there and it helped keep guys fresh and the players were all in because they were playing consistently. Like, that's a bunch of BS if you ask me, because players don't want to be on a rotation, especially a young guy. And then another guy that's got a large contract they don't want to be on a rotation. That's the whole basis of baseball, is to play consistently so you can stay hot. So when you're consistently putting guys on ice and killing all the momentum that they might have built up, good or bad, it's hard to come back from it. So I do feel for Jasson, because he's having questions that his manager is being asked that don't necessarily feel super, like, I don't feel like they need to be asking these questions. I feel like a lot of times the media asks these questions because they're trying to get comments, and there's a lot of people that are involved in this development process with the Yankees. So one guy can say something, another guy can say a different thing, and then it can kind of create a little bit of a different direction of what these guys are saying. And they started to ask about if Jasson should just stop switch hitting, and it's like, this dude's like 24. I mean, we're gonna ask if he needs to stop switch hitting because he didn't get a ton of at bats hitting right-handed. So I mean, I'll commend Boone a little bit towards the end. Like, he did have his back. He didn't talk negative about him. He's not going to. That's really not the type of manager that he is, even though sometimes he probably should. But what he should have done, in my opinion, is say that Jasson Dominguez is going to be our starting left fielder right now, as long as nothing changes. That would help the kid and get his spirits lifted, as he's going to go into a spring training where he's kind of looking around wondering what his situation's even going to be. Something that I'm really getting stuck on right here is that when Boone was asked, how do you close the gap between the Yankees and the Blue Jays? He obviously will sit there and he's going to play damage control, and he's going to let everybody know that the gap was not that far. Out of 13 games, they won 5. They got beat up in the playoffs. They had the same record as them. They obviously lost head to head, and he's going to make it seem like it really wasn't that big of a difference, that they just got beat against them whenever they played, and yada yada yada. But I'm gonna kind of like give my own analysis on that, because I understand where he's coming from. He's not gonna sit there and say that the Blue Jays and the Yankees gap is that far. He doesn't believe that. I think that everyone in that building that's affiliated with the Yankees, like, delusionally doesn't believe that. But to the naked eye, it was very obvious that there was parts of the Yankees that, or there was parts of the Blue Jays that the Yankees players didn't have. And what that is just those consistent at bats. They got the outs whenever they needed to on the mound. They had pitching that stepped up. Obviously, the Yankees had some pitching that stepped up, but they won. They won the games. However they won them, they won them. So when I sit here and I hear him say, how are you going to close the gap? I feel like the easy answer would have been, we've got some guys that we're really expecting to deliver again in a better fashion next year. And if those guys deliver for us, then the gap closes. Like, that's the reality of it, is that he is sitting here and he's making comments about players, and he's talking about them, saying that there's a little bit more in the tank. And a few of those players that I'm thinking about right now are, he made some comments about Austin Wells. He's obviously made some comments about Anthony Volpe. He did not sit there and say that Jasson Dominguez was their starting left fielder. So you believe that there's a little bit more in the tank, because he obviously didn't play a lot down the stretch. And then the other thing that I keep getting hung up on is how they're approaching the Trent Grisham talk sometimes, where they're kind of making it seem like we hope that he can do the same thing next season that he did last season. Like, there's not a whole lot of, in my, at least what I've seen, it doesn't feel like they fully believe that he's going to repeat that, especially whenever I hear Brian Cashman say that he kind of came out of nowhere and had a borderline all-star season. And so for me, it's just hard to get around some of these comments. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not really trying to, like, poke and pry at everything that they're saying, but sometimes when the questions are asked and the answers that are given, it's just confusing, because it feels like they have a lot of players that they think need to play better next year. So when they make the comments that they have a team that's really good, and then they've also made comments that we need this guy to step up, this guy's going to step up, we're going to be vulnerable in the pitching, we're going to potentially not even have a left fielder, and we're not going to publicly give you guys any comments on the salary cap. For me, it's just like, there's a lot of stuff in 2026 that needs to be answered, and there's not a lot of days left on the calendar in 2025. And then obviously, once we cross over into 2026, spring training's right around the corner. I mean, the pitchers and catchers will report like that. And we know that if anything happens in an offseason, it can happen fast. But for me, it feels like the Yankees are kind of making people think that their team is good right now, and I don't know what kind of move they're going to make. They're doing a really good job at throwing a lot of confusion out there, and I I don't know. I'm not trying to get too poetic and hang on to things too much about it, but it feels like right now that it's a slow burner, right? This is a slow burner, and they might leave us with a cliffhanger and not do anything. And that wouldn't be good. That would not be good because if they don't do that, if they do that, then people are going to be upset. I mentioned it yesterday that the lineup drops off heavily. Starting pitching needs some additions. You lost some bullpen guys. Like, you got to make a move. You got to, especially whenever I'm seeing that freaking Pete Alonso might be meeting with some of these AL East teams. I mean, seems to me, and then I'm seeing that there's Kyle Tucker visiting the Blue Jays, and that then I hear that there's been no talk with Kyle Tucker at all. And Boone's making comments that he hasn't had any kind of conversations with Cody Bellinger, and that that's not something that he normally does. All right, just to go into things a little bit further, I'm sitting here and I'm watching back some of these comments that Boone's making, just trying to refresh my mind and hear what he's saying and try to, like, you know, figure out what some of it means, because again, I've said this many times, it's hard to figure out what some of these guys are actually thinking. They're not really authentic with their answers, but sometimes they are, and sometimes you can kind of get a little tidbit in there. And something that I'm hearing whenever I'm listening to this is Booney just keeps saying that we'll see how the winter unfolds. We'll see how the winter unfolds. And so, he makes comments along the lines of, you just never know with winter meetings or in the off season how things are going to play out, because sometimes guys might not be available and then all of a sudden they're available, and then maybe some guy might not be a guy that you want to sign, and then all of a sudden you have interest in signing the guy. So I get that. I mean, I see that being pretty true. I think that things change pretty quickly in some regards, but I do think that they know what they need and they know what they want. And what they're doing is they're still leaving a lot of unknown, especially around this catcher first base situation a little bit, because Booney was making some comments that seemed to be like, um, the Austin Wells needs to step up a little bit more. I know he didn't say it exactly like that, but he did say that, and he made sure to phrase it that it wasn't a knock on him. He obviously had a good year offensively at times, and then didn't. And I'm not a guy that really necessarily knows how to grade catchers, so I don't know how he manned the position and necessarily if it was a really good job that he did. I don't know that, but what I do know is that he seems to think that Austin Wells needs to improve in some areas because he believes that he's better than what he showed. And then he goes on to make some comments about JC, saying that, and JC is their backup catcher. JC is a little bit better than the world might know. So he didn't say it like that. He just said that I don't think the world necessarily knows how good he is. And he did it with a little bit of a smile. And he made sure to stay on both sides of the ball. So if I'm hearing him give the compliment to JC and then kind of say that Austin Wells needs to perform a little bit better because that's what he thinks that he can do, I'm kind of thinking that there's going to be a little bit of a competition going on between the catchers next year. I mean, I'm not breaking news here or anything, but seems like Austin Wells might have to look over his shoulder with this JC guy, the way that Aaron Boone was grinning talking about him. And then to go even a step further, you throw in the thought that Ben Rice can play catcher. And then he made the comment about the first base that we'll see how it unfolds. And so he didn't, again, I don't know why they do this sometimes and why they have guys that are guaranteed to be that guy, but he kind of left it open-ended that maybe if they get a guy that plays first base, then you could see that Ben Rice could maybe play a lot more catcher than they're expecting him to play right now. So didn't necessarily shut down the notion that Ben Rice is just going to be only first base next year. Certainly alluded that he wants him to stay crisp back there because he thinks he's capable. So again, it makes you wonder what the catching situation is going to look like. So they will have 3 catchers on the roster, more than likely, with Austin Wells, JC, and Ben Rice. All 3 would be left-handed. that's something that they'll work. He was asked the question, "Will you go after a right-handed catcher?" He pretty much answered that one pretty truthfully. It sounded like saying not necessarily. So that seemed to be like one of the only times that he was like, "No, no, we're good." So I'm hearing that the catching spot potentially could be a little bit of a toss up on who's going to be your guy next year. Is it going to be Austin Wells? Is it going to be JC? Or is it going to be Ben Rice? We're going to find out when 2026 rolls around. The whole Sonny Gray thing seems to be something that people are having fun with, and they're obviously wanting to know more and more about it and try to understand what Sonny Gray meant and why he felt the way that he felt. And Aaron Boone was asked that question, and so was Brian Cashman. And I feel like, again, I'm watching one of the most gaslighted responses I've ever seen from Aaron Boone about the Sonny Gray situation. Because if you listen, I've spoken about this, and I don't want to be the guy that just like airs out someone else's situation. But when we had the meeting, that was one of the most intense meetings I've ever been a part of, where Brian Cashman is looking everybody in the face and saying, if you don't want to be here, I will relocate it. Now, I'll shed a little bit more light on that because this is worth mentioning. To go even further, Brian Cashman mentioned his height and weight whenever he was up in front of the crowd and said that he's not a scary guy. So say it to his face, right? So when you want to answer the question about did Sonny Gray hate his time in New York? And then you're like, I don't know about hate. And he kind of played it off that because he's in Boston, maybe that's why he's saying some of these things to spice the rivalry up. Like, brother, it had nothing to do with him being in Boston, why he said that he hates the Yankees. He hated that place. You guys tried to make him pitch at a way different version than the guy that you traded for. That's why he hated it. Sonny came over and had a moment in time when the Yankees certainly tried to tell him a certain way to pitch and certain things to throw and what to throw and how to throw it, and it fucked with his game. Sorry to say that, but it really did. Like, it was not good. He did not pitch to the way that he knew that he could. And obviously, there was some serious back and forth between him and those teams, or him and that team, because Sonny is an established pitcher. And he was very, very well sought after. He's always been a guy that teams want on their team. He's a good teammate, he's a good pitcher. And when you start to mess with the guy's DNA on what made him successful, and then you traded for him, it's like, you're just creating issues along the way, right? Because again, players are so unique in their own way that they know how to do things their way. And when you start to stack these obstacles in front of them that make them think about the game differently, that's not always good. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say that players can't look in a direction of help from other people, but when you acquire this guy at the deadline, I don't know if you should be telling him how to pitch going into the second half of the season when obviously you trade for him to be a contending team for many months to come, and then you want to switch some stuff up with a guy that you just got your hands on. So I'm not going to sit here and allow the whole Sonny Gray stuff to just be tossed up as he was with the Red Sox and that's why he made these comments to make the rivalry a little bit spicier. Man, I'm not gonna lie. That one bothered me. So I'm not letting that one slip, brother. I'm not letting that one slip. We're obviously, as guys that are reporting the stuff in terms of what's going on in the Yankee universe right now, I'm not trying to be somebody that just continuously regurgitates the same comments or the same players' names consistently, but I've got to talk about the Cody Bellinger stuff because I'm hearing Booney say that they really want him back. We heard yesterday Brian Cashman say that it's very much still in play for Cody Bellinger, and then I see Booney's making comments that he doesn't really talk to free agents. He leaves that up to the front office, and I think that he should reach out to Cody Bellinger. Obviously, Cody's played there for a while. He's probably wanting to have some bit of conversation. I mean, he's probably going to lean on Scott Boras to do 99% of the negotiating for him, but Scott Boras does not negotiate like in the nicest way or the most fun way. I know that he's one of those guys that teams don't necessarily love to work with, but if you're a player that is with Scott, then you know that Scott, sorry to burp there. you know that Scott is going to go out and make sure that he gets you the biggest contract possible. So it's pretty obvious why teams don't like working with Scott. But I feel like in a moment like this, if you really, really, really want to drive it home to Cody Bellinger that you want him back and you say that you never speak to free agents, go speak to him. Reach out to him. Let him know that you want him back. I mean, he knows that you want him back. I would say that they probably had some bit of conversation during the season in that regard, but let him know, dude. Just reach out, show him a little love. That's the one thing that I want to see the Yankees do. Show everybody some love. You show all the other guys love, certain guys at least, and some guys don't get that love. So just reach out to him, send him a text, send him a wink, send him something that says that I'm thinking about you and that I would still love to be your manager, brother, because I think that you guys need anything that you can to have the upper hand on teams that will be going after Cody Bellinger. And obviously, he's been with the organization in the last few years. He probably enjoyed his time there, but if he doesn't, I've certainly got some thoughts on some stuff that I want to say if he's another one of these players that's with the Yankees that heads to free agency that doesn't come back. And I actually recorded that segment and then I put a question mark next to that segment in the downloads because I don't think I want to say it just yet. I kind of think I want to make a video about this because I think that it could be an interesting topic. So if Cody Bellinger does not sign back, you will see something from me about why or what we're going to talk about why some of these players sign with other teams after they hit free agency when they're with the Yankees. So during the press conference, when Booney's being just bombarded with questions, you can hear some good ones trickling along the way. And one of my favorite questions that he was asked was, what does this team that you've got in 2026 need? And he seemed to be okay with where they're at, you know? He's certainly sounding to me like he's going to lean pretty heavily on the development of some of these players that they have, the younger players advancing a little bit further, you know? He made the comment about Warren getting better, Ben Rice getting better, Austin Wells getting better, Jasson Dominguez, Cam Slitler, all these guys that they had that are young guys, they're banking on them getting better. And I can see Slitler getting better. I can see Will Warren getting better. I don't know how I'm going to see Jasson Dominguez getting better if he's not playing. And now I'm sitting here saying that I don't know what the catching situation is going to look like because it sounds to me like they think a lot of the backup JC and seem to think that Austin Wells needs to take some steps forward. So I don't know how we'll see Austin Wells step forward or JC step forward if the playing time is limited. So I'm poking at those comments because I think that you're sitting here and you're telling the crowd that you want to believe that your team's going to be better because these young players are going to get better, but these young players seem to be blocked. And a lot of them might be blocked because you keep saying that we'll see how the winter unfolds. And so some of these young guys aren't going to get that chance. And that is really my biggest gripe with the Yankees player development, because once they get to the big leagues, they're still developing. They keep saying this stuff like this dude skipped the minor leagues, or this dude didn't have a lot of playing time, or this dude is just so good. And it's like, well, then why are you sitting here telling me that he needs to get better at this spot? Or why didn't he play over the full season? And why'd you bench him in the playoffs? And why are we talking about maybe going out and getting some depth pieces that might be replacing these guys and yada yada yada? So I'm just hearing a lot of things that kind of contradict how they actually feel about this roster, because when I'm looking at Aaron Boone during the press conference, I can see some stuff that we were taught in media training right in front of me, right? And one of the things that you guys need to really understand is when you see some of these players or these managers with the Yankees go up there and talk, and they have a little bit of extended downtime in between their answers, it's because they're really thinking about what they're going to say. You know, they always try to tell us that don't tweet something or don't say something that you wouldn't be comfortable seeing on a billboard every second of every day. So I know that, you know, Aaron Judge does it more than anybody. You know, they'll ask him a question, he'll do his little, and then he'll give a little grin, and then he'll take some time, and then he answers his questions. And then someone like me, I'm not even breathing in between these comments right now, but that's authentic answers. I'm giving you what I feel. And so when I'm seeing Booney kind of take his time to answer these questions, it feels to me like he's been vetted to a certain regard to not say certain things, and that he's trying to make sure that he's answering these questions and still keeping that unknown of what they have under their car or in their cards for the offseason, because clearly their favorite quote for winter meetings right now is that we will see how the winter will unfold.